I noticed that when I would plant in my garden, when I'd get down on my hands and knees and till the soil with my hands, I was working outside. And usually, when you work outside, you get tired and you get sunbaked. But I would get invigorated.
You are listening to And If Love Remains, a unique show spotlighting people, ideas, science, culture, and art. Your host, Mike Lovett.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to that great podcast in the sky, And If Love Remains. This is Mike Levitt, your sometimes virtuous, occasionally vile, always virile host. And with your help, we will go viral by you doing that thing that you do, subscribe and share. I have with us the man, the machine, the legend, Benjamin Hyde. So good to have him back. I think this is your third time on the show, and this is going to be a great show. I'm very excited to have you on. Thanks for being here, man.
Beep, 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 beep. Hello. You called me a machine, man. I got to go with it.
That's right. I like that, man. That's good. Oh, well, it's funny. I don't know, a couple weeks ago, I sent you a video, just kind of leading into what we want to talk about some exciting developments and energy, and it got me thinking. And you replied back to me. We had a nice little conversation. I want to talk about that, but got me really thinking about, like, there's so much in this world that we can really complain about, that we can be upset about, and frankly, rightfully be angry about. But when it comes to certain things, especially in the world of science and technology, there's some really exciting developments that might be, I know a lot of times we talk about us being in the information age, but I think we might be moving into like the energy age, this energy revolution that's happening.
I hope so. I hope you're absolutely right. And I think there's a
Yeah,
lot of evidence for that, to be honest.
I think you're right too. There's so many amazing things that people are doing. And I wanted to talk about some of the new technologies and some of the new discoveries and things that people are doing. I'm kind of one of those suckers that if anything that comes across my feed that talks about, like, hey, have your car run on water, or anything like that, I'm going to click on it and see what the heck they're talking about.
Right.
Um, but these are some legitimate stuff that's really happening. How do you want to begin? Where do you want to start with some of these things? There's three that I kind of have in mind, but what are the things that are exciting you?
Well, let's start with that water car because I've got a couple stories for you on
Okay,
that. So you sent me that. Why don't you tell everybody what you sent me, and then we'll launch from there.
absolutely. So I sent you a video by, I just lost his name for a second. Oh my gosh.
Let me see if I can find him because I remember watching that.
Yeah. Oh, James Tour, Dr. James Tour.
Okay.
And Dr. Tour is, he's probably, from what I've gathered, and his reputation is in nanotechnology. Um, he's a chemist. And he builds companies to help with, um, he builds machines, and he builds things out of carbon, but it's not carbon. It's called something else.
It is called, let's see, I think he was working on
Graphene. There
HHO.
we go. Graphene.
Right.
So he makes, and he's really well known for um, doing things with graphene and making graphene out of, many times anything that's made out of carbon. That's where I got a little bit confused. Even trash and plastics and things like that. Like his apparently his technologies are pretty incredible, and he is a scientist that does, um, um, that works out of a university. He also has companies. I mean, this is not a slipshod kind of guy. Um, and what excited me is he put out a video saying that he could demonstrate a method for for creating hydrogen, what he calls, free and clean green energy alternative through the making of graphene. And which is exciting, really exciting, because I think hydrogen is one of those alternative fuel sources that has kind of been put on the back burner and I think the reason why is because it's so difficult to move around and to transport and things like that. Um, but this
I
was exciting
think,
to me.
right. It's very combustible, to be sure.
Yes.
But as far as difficult to make, I don't, it's not that difficult to make. Now, as far as a cost expense, it might be more difficult, but it's been made, it was used in the Apollo program, if I remember right. And then I've actually had friends who have used electrolysis, not the same method that James Tour has used, but have just built these devices and brought them out and played with them. It's actually terribly easy to split water into oxygen and hydrogen.
Okay,
And
so
so,
then the problem, and he did talk about that, how
yeah,
one of the things he was excited about is that he could get that cost
the
down to,
cost down, exactly.
yeah, to pennies on the dollar, basically. And
Well,
I wonder how much of that is because this is one of the comments I think I made to you is, you know, he's doing this in conjunction with making graphene, and because graphene is so expensive, I mean, it's thousands of dollars per sheet, and um, and so incredibly useful that cost basically, like, because it's a waste product from the making of graphene, it's
yeah,
almost that kind of subsidized the cost a lot. Is That's kind of the impression I got.
it was an interesting video to be sure. And if anybody looks him up on Google or any other search engine, you'll see a lot of information that comes. And that may not be for everyone's taste
Right,
because he's got some of his own uh, personal opinions that he adds into the science, which may or may not be your cup of tea. But if you
right,
just can stick with the science, you might find some stuff there that's quite interesting.
right, and you're right. I mean, he's certainly he's a Christian. He's not shy about it at all.
He's
And so,
unabashed. He's
right,
unabashed with them.
right in the middle of this video, he's like, "Hey, I'll do a Zoom call with you if you don't believe in Jesus. Let's talk about this." So,
That's
I
the
mean,
one. That's the
so
one.
I don't, but you're right. Like, if you just look at the science aspect of it and what he's doing from just um, and I think the graphene thing is exciting too. But um, the idea of being able to cheaply create hydrogen and free it up and allow us to use it, potentially, and I don't know what the maybe this might be the theme for the show. Is one of the things I'm most excited about is you have all these competing technologies that are happening kind of at the same time, and we really don't know what the best case use is for these technologies, in my opinion. And so as we experiment and as we discover and figure out, I mean, who knows, maybe hydrogen can be used better, more for power plants and things like that, where we'd have fusion cars or something like that.
Right.
I don't know the answer, but I think as we discover it, it's exciting to have these different technologies competing.
You know what I've found just personally is that when you sit around and you try and think of ideas of what is the best use for something, that's not as effective or as useful as actually getting in and playing with it with your hands and manipulating it. You think that you can create all of the ideas just by thinking about it, doing a Hercule Poirot. I don't know if you're familiar with Agatha Christie's fictional detective, but he would sit in his chair and think about all the scenarios of all the clues and evidences, and that he would come up with, oh, I figured out who the murderer is. That's a fun little story, but I've found it in real life, it's not as effective as actually getting your hands dirty and getting
Yeah.
in and playing with stuff. There's just something about the tactile response of physically manipulating stuff that engenders and inspires and creates new avenues of thought and new avenues of things to do.
Right.
Because anyone could sit in a chair, sit in their bed, sit in a lab and think about it, write equations even and saying, okay, we'll do thought experiments. But to actually physically get in there with graphene or with hydrogen and play around with it,
Right.
you literally do make breakthroughs by just screwing around. Like, what happens if I add this to it? What happens if I add that to it? What if I tweak it this way?
Yep.
And
Oh,
that's from personal experience. I've done that.
yeah, I know you have, and that's why I love having you on, because you are a tinkerer to the nth degree. I love it, and that is one of those um, exciting things I think we're going to see over time. Is how people play around with this stuff, and it's the same thing with everything. Like in music, there's you can look at a piece of music all you want, or even listen to it all you want, but until you actually play it, you don't understand it.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Oh, that's a great example. There was, in fact, let's dive into music just a little bit. When I
sure,
was in
I'm game.
high when I was in high school, so I play trumpet. When I was in high school, we learned about improvisation. So there was me on trumpet, I had a friend on tenor sax, and I had a friend on drums, trap set. And we would get together after school and have jam sessions. And of course, you and I know a jam session is just where you're making up music as you go. There's no sheet music in front of you.
Right.
And man, that is just one of the most rewarding times to be a musician is when all of a sudden the flow hits and you're doing your 12 measures and all of a sudden you turn it over to your friend and they feel the transition coming and they take it and they build upon what you have done and all of a sudden there's just a magic electricity in the air that you can feel and you're just playing for like 15-20 minutes
Yeah.
and all of a sudden you feel the ending come and you just all end it together and no one has said a thing and it's right there. You know what I'm talking about, don't you?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's when you start to learn. I think that's when you start doing that, you realize how much music is a language, because you end up talking to each other, through
You
this
do.
improv process,
You do.
and sometimes you're arguing, and sometimes you're playful, and sometimes I mean, it's a wonderful experience to be there, and when you're in the pocket, as they say, and things are flowing well. Um it it it, it is it's one of those 1+1=5 moments, because it's
Right.
divine. It's an experience that um I'm sure in other fields people can experience, but it's unique in music. Um,
It's very visible in music.
yeah,
It's really easy to see. And you're right. Sometimes you do argue, as you say. You don't always work. Sometimes you'll finish a piece and you're just like, well, that didn't go so well. And it's not like it was horrible, but the energy wasn't there. But man, when it hits, and that's really
well,
fun.
and it's exciting, because then you start to, like, for me, when I started doing that, I looked at music in a whole new way. For example, I realized what composers were trying to do, where they were trying to, recreate some of those moments. And so, for example, if you listen to one of my favorite examples is if you listen to Beethoven's First Concerto, which is not, people will not say it's one of his best, and he was young. It was definitely, it sounds almost more like Mozart than Beethoven.
Oh, wow.
He hasn't quite hit the romantic Beethoven that we all know and love.
Right.
Um, but when you listen, especially to that first movement, you hear um, a real back and forth between the piano and the orchestra, and you hear, like, the piano will play, and then the orchestra will just cut it off like mid sentence, and continue, and then the piano says, "No, it's my turn," and it becomes a very, anything I can do, or anything you can do, I can do better moment, and it's really exciting. to see the back and forth happen between, this enormous orchestra and this single piano player that's competing with it in a real way. It's fun. Um,
It really
and
is.
Yeah,
Speaking
it
of
is.
speaking of classical music, one of the really enjoyable things that I found with music is the fusion of styles. And one of my favorite fusions is dubstep with classical. Have you heard this?
I have. It's
It is
incredible.
it is incredible. It's like they were built for each other. It
It
is done so well.
Okay, I
Just
gotta find this. Um, because literally just last night, Ben.
oh, was it really?
Literally just last night, I was listening to this artist, and I've got to, I mean, look at my history. Um, and I was so shocked because he only has like, I don't know, 400 subscribers or something like that.
Yeah,
But I'm gonna send you a link because you'll love it. His name he's from Germany.
yeah.
Schallbauer, I think it's his name. Is how you pronounce it? Schallbauer.
Okay.
He did. I mean, he's done several things that I can see. Um, but he did this thing, and it's literally called Schallbauer Electric Classical Music in an Old Cinema in Berlin. And it's this incredible, like, so he's playing with synths and things like that, so he's moving knobs and stuff, and
Yeah.
then you have a cellist and a violinist and a guitar player.
Oh,
um and to me it was so beautiful. It was just, so I wouldn't call it the mix between dubstep and classical, but just those sounds. Because a lot of times when you hear classical music mixed with like electronic music, like the electronic, it just sounds like two different worlds. It doesn't mix well. Um, but with dubstep's different because you have like you have those little wah wah wah, that just
exactly.
builds up those basses a lot, and there's some cool stuff. But this was just, it was different and beautiful, and I'm gonna send it to you. I think you'll enjoy it.
Oh, absolutely. Great.
Yeah,
Yeah, I when I first heard that a few years ago, I'm just like, oh wow, it's like they were made for each other. And you're right,
yeah,
it's not every version, not everybody can pull it off. Just in the same way that the flow doesn't always start when we were improvising.
right,
But
right,
boy, if it hits hard. It's so good.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that makes art is that you tap into something deeper and more, that ESP, I don't know what
Right.
it is, but you tap into something where all this there. I can't remember what story I read, but there's a story that was very interesting where, um I think it was a sci-fi or fantasy, but where somebody's eyes were open and they could see like all the connections that people had to each other. There's like little light beams going to each
Sure.
other. Kind of an interesting concept, and how some were stronger than others and all this stuff. But when you're in that flow state, man, it's like it's like you have, like, you're not just connected with the people around you, but you're the the you're connected to the audience. You're connected to the
Right.
trees. Like everything becomes an influence, and that's when art like becomes real and honest, and you have that artistic integrity that just like
It
makes people want to enjoy it.
right. You're not just the audience and you become one. You're not
Yeah.
islands of humanity. You're all one group. And
Yeah.
sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. But boy, when it does, it's beautiful.
It's
It's a beautiful
magic.
thing. It
It's
is. It's
magic.
what it
We
feels like.
My friend Elias and I, we he's on the show quite a bit, and we talk a lot about like the relationship between the composer, the artist, and the audience, like how that dynamic is so important, and tapping into that thing um, is really, um, you know it's essential to getting a really truly great performance.
Right. Well, there's even a corollary, and as there should be, between this and the Sapphire Project. I mean,
Yeah.
I realize that's a crazy segue.
No, I'm interested in where you're going here, man. This is
Well,
good.
when they were doing the Sapphire project, I don't know if you remember this. Well, you probably do. They sent in a Langmuir probe into the plasma, and they have a video of the Langmuir probe vaporizing.
That's right.
Do you remember that?
I do remember
And that
that.
was exactly, they didn't expect it. He said they had three different people run the equations to determine whether it was safe to put the Langmuir probe in, whether it was going to be too hot. And all three of them, with the current knowledge of science, says, no, it'll be fine. But they have it on video that they sent that Langmuir probe right up to the surface, whoop, vaporized. And they're like, that shouldn't have happened.
Right.
Our best knowledge tells us that that shouldn't have happened. There was an excess of energy that was clearly there, demonstrably there, unequivocally there, that we didn't know about. In the same way that, when we get together in a theater performance or a music performance, we have the flow state comes, and all of a sudden the whole thing is the 1 + 1 = 5 event. The
Right.
energy is bigger than any one or even group of people can put together. And that's
Yep.
exactly the way the universe, to me, should work. If there is a phenomenon in any particular corner, it should manifest in every other corner. This whole idea
Absolutely.
that quantum physics has separate rules for the really small and the really big is just stupid. I just
I'm No,
makes me
I'm
want
with you. It's very like, and I think we've talked about this before. Is like, my theory of the fractal, which is
right.
not my theory, but the idea that like everything has to work. All
It
if something
has
isn't
to.
working all the way up and all the way down, then we're missing something.
Right.
Something is
Exactly.
wrong with our theory. It's like
Exactly.
I was listening to Bob Murphy, who's he's a um, economist, but he was talking about some of this stuff, and he's a smart guy, and he was talking about the universe. He's like, I don't know I mean, I don't know the answer, but if you have to come up with a theory where over 97 or 99% of the universe is dark energy and dark energy that you can't, then I suspect there's probably something wrong with the theory, not with what we're measuring.
Right. I remember when I first learned about the idea of dark matter, dark energy, I kind of ran with it. And I said, wow, we really don't know about the universe.
Right.
And I'm thinking that leaves open a lot of different phenomenon that we call spooky and weird to be there, and then I kind of grew out of that idea. I'm like, really? That's really profoundly an ignorant thing to say, that we don't know what 97% of the universe is. And then I did the research in it and found out what they meant when they said dark matter and dark energy, that it was just a placeholder. And all of a sudden I realized, oh, you've got your equations wrong. You're looking at the wrong way. And
Right.
it all fell apart after that. I'm like, oh, guys,
Yeah.
it's just electricity. It's just charge. And you have completely ignored that in your equations. And so therefore, since you threw that away, you needed another placeholder.
Right.
And now you're
And
just
and
making stuff up when the answer is right next to you.
No, absolutely. It's in that same like podcast, he was actually interviewing a guy who was talking about, and then this kind of goes back to, where did we all go wrong? Um, he was interviewing a guy who was um talking about how of all things, like what of all the things that we have, what do you think could be the least corruptible? Well, I would think it'd be math, because a 1 + 1 is 2, right? Like you can't corrupt that. But this guy was making the argument. Let me say it this way: was making the argument that math had been completely corrupted, through the idea of imaginary numbers, through the idea of
Right.
um, infinities, and all
Hmm.
these like kind of crazy stuff that honestly leads to things like calculus. But he's like, we could figure out calculus without all these little cheats. But we can. But what happened? The downstream of that is that then it corrupts science, and it all happened around the same time, like around the late 19th, early 20th century, where
That's right.
all of this stuff just kind of got corrupted, and we thought we were too smart for our own britches, and Einstein happens, and all this stuff, and it's like, you know we got our ladder up the wrong wall, man. We're not looking at this right,
I
because it
think
should
we
be simpler. When we look out into the universe with these new telescopes and these new technologies, or we look down into the universe with these new microscopes and new technologies, like, we shouldn't be more confused. It should be fractal in nature. We
exactly.
should be able to figure it out.
Exactly. I was having a conversation with somebody online the other day, and he was asking about the nature of electrons and particles. And when he said that, I realized, well, wait a minute, this actually should be fairly easy to figure out if we can just get our thinking straight. Because if everything is fractal, and I believe it is, what an electron is should be manifest in the real world or in the macroscopic world. So we
Right.
just need to look around us and we'll find the corollary to an electron around us. We just have to adjust our thinking into a fractal mindset, to where we realize that the scaling of all things is visible around us. And
And
so, since electrons are so powerfully small, maybe we just need to look at a really, really, really big version of it. And maybe that's where James Webb is really going to help out.
yeah, yeah, I hope so. Because my thought is, or my hypothesis, we'll put it that way. My hypothesis is that when we start looking at it differently, when we start thinking of it um, in that way, that we'll find out that things like energy retrieval, things like being able to access the energy of the sun, or being able to access the energy of water, being able to access the energy of atoms, will become far simpler, far
Right.
less violent, and far easier than we ever imagined. That's my hypothesis. I don't know if I'm right, but it seems like we really overcomplicate things by trying to bang things together and including ideas.
I agree. Well, think about this. Does nature do anything the hard way? No.
No.
No, when you said that we complicate things, that is exactly right. We absolutely complicate things. In fact, that's going back to the Sapphire Project. That was one of their one of their philosophical motivations, is that they didn't want to complicate what nature did with plasma and electricity. They wanted to follow what nature did and see what happens. They wanted
Right.
to recreate nature, not force it to do something like, some of the ITER uh, reactors that are being built, where they force matter to smash into each other. They just said, no, we're going to recreate the sun in a jar and see what happens and be able to measure it in ways that we could never do with our own sun. And that's what they found out. They found transmutation of elements. They found idea breaking scenarios. It was amazing, absolutely
Right.
just mind blowing what they found. And all they did, they followed nature. They didn't try and force their will upon it.
Absolutely. I think that's right. I think um yeah, I man, we are so full of hubris in so many ways.
Yeah, that's
um
that's really
and
frustrating.
and that hubris becomes a block to everything that we really want.
Oh, it is. Absolutely. And
Um
then we just, how many times have you and I just sat like the little kid on the parade route, pointing our finger, going, hey guys, the emperor has no clothes.
right.
And you're just like, guys, how many times do we have to go through this? It's not even the same emperor. It's like one emperor walks by naked, and another one walks
And the
by, and
next
another
one.
one walks by. You're like, guys, everyone's naked. All the
Right.
emperors are naked.
Right.
It's like, just pay attention to what nature does. Stop forcing it, and
Yeah.
you'll see the truth.
Man,
Are you familiar with the work of Victor Schauberger?
I'm not. No.
Oh, he was another one of these marvelous people that just got his ego out of the way. He was essentially a water scientist, a naturalist, uh, back in Bavaria, Germany. I'm trying to think of exactly where he was, turn of the century. But he would study streams of water and learned the best way to log to send logs through water, which
Okay.
actually contributed to the industry of logging. It really greatly increased it, and you can have your own opinion about that. But he studied the attributes of water, and his one of his main mantras is look to nature and then copy.
Right. Yes.
Observe nature and then copy. But there's
Yeah.
a fantastic documentary on him. Just look up Victor Schauberger, and you'll spend a lovely hour learning about things you had no idea about. You're like, wow, I didn't know water could do that. And
That's,
all he did was just observe
you
and
know,
copy.
it reminds me that, and I don't know the gentleman's name, but I don't know if you've heard of the concept of like, and I promise I'm not going in a weird direction, even though it might seem it. But the concept of like, not inverted, but inclined sleeping, like sleeping with your, at an angle.
Oh,
Have you heard of
right.
this before?
Uh, I don't think I have. I know
Okay.
people who. Okay, go ahead.
So, um, here's the idea is that you maybe lift your head up 6 to 8 inches, and it's not just your head. Like in other words, a lot of times hospital bed or something will lift your head up, but no, you want to be at an angle so that your feet are down and you're at a flat angle, about 6 to 8 inches up. And it does like incredible things for your body, and I'll explain what it is. But um, well, for example, it gets rid of varicose veins.
Oh,
Um, it allows um, flow, like blood flow, to work better. Like um, you're actually able to get more by having your head elevated, and this is what was really interesting. By having your head elevated, it allowed your allow blood flow to get to your brain while you're sleeping easier than if you're laying flat. And that seems kind of counterintuitive, but here's the theory, and this is how it came about. And there's other lots of other health benefits, and you can see, like for example, Egyptian mummies in their beds, the kings and stuff, their beds are set at an angle in that direction.
hmm,
Um, and there's all kinds of like evidence that we kind of knew this in the past, but we didn't understand why. Again, he's not like a physiologist or somebody who studies the body.
right.
He's an engineer. This guy was an engineer, and he just had a thought of like, why are trees tall? Like, what a
Oh,
fundamental thought.
right,
Like that, it kind of doesn't like why do trees spend so much energy being tall? There must be some advantage evolutionary wise that why they're tall.
right.
And so he studied and studied, and he what he figured out was that um as and as trees would um so the leaves of the trees would expel oxygen, right? And what that did was would get rid of the water that it had basically brought up from the roots. Well, how do you get the water from the roots to the leaves? Because
A great question.
yeah, because you can't do it just by it doesn't suck it up, you know.
Right.
But here's what would happen is that so the oxygen would be released from the leaves. Then it concentrates the into sap, what we call sap. Sap is heavier than water, so the sap goes down and the water rises just right in proportion with the sap. And so it's able to get up to the leaves, and so now the leaves have a better chance because they can get better sunlight and all of these things. Well, that's all fine and this is why I love, again, tinkers and engineers. I love them because then they think outside the box. They think, well, okay, then I mean we're pretty tall for animals. Maybe there's a reason why we're tall.
Right.
Other than we have two eyes and we can see over stuff like that. That's kind of obvious, but for example, the heart isn't strong enough to pump the blood through the body the way we think it is. Um,
This.
and
Yep.
and so
Yep.
but it's the same exact concept. As we expel CO2, it concentrates our blood, which then drops down, which brings the blood up. And so when we spend 6 to 10 hours a day lying on our side, it's not helping our circulation at all. It's literally creating pools and not doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, how many times have we
Um,
heard of blood pooling problems? So that's why
right.
people
And
wear
s- and
elastic
so
socks and whatnot.
and exactly. And so if you're able to just elevate a bit so you're uncomfortable,
Right.
um and I've done this. It's actually quite, I'll tell you, like I had some incredible pain in my shoulders all the time for years and years. It was awful. And I tried it, and within a week the pain in my shoulder was completely gone.
Wow.
But my
Well, that's
point in telling
interesting.
you this story and telling you this idea is like it goes back to what you were saying. If we follow nature and follow it all the way up and all the way down, if we follow it in that matter, we'll find these patterns that we can utilize and use for our own benefit.
Right. Well, that's interesting. I had read another, get this, a completely different reason how the water gets from the roots to the leaves
Oh
of
wow.
trees. Completely different. I am not. It's amazing, but both of them, both the inverted idea that you're talking about with the gas exchange, and
Right.
the one that I read out just has to do with something called easy water, are both examples of simplicity.
Right.
And I'm just like, wait a minute, is it just the position you're in and or easy water? Well, if it is, that makes sense because it's
Yep.
simplicity. It's just it's not a vastly complex thing. It's something that can easily be understood. I'm going to look into
Absolutely.
that. That's really cool.
It was really fascinating to me, and it's one of those things that I'm like, well, what's the what's the Ben Franklin on this one? Like, what's the risk of trying it? And what, it doesn't work? It's like
Right.
this is an easy one to try. Just raise the bed up. Okay, I can do that.
So what? How
Um,
did you do it? Did you just get a thicker pillow, or what did you do?
no, I got because you want your entire mattress to be at the angle. Like you don't want to bend in the mattress if you can help it. So what I did is I just got some bricks and I put them underneath the frame and just raised the top up. I mean, it was
So
as
the
simple as that.
really,
Yeah. Yep.
so the bed frame was tilted.
Right. So the entire bed, yeah, exactly. So you're at a, I don't know what that would be, 9 degrees, 10 degree, whatever, 12 degrees, something like that. You're yeah, you're angled instead of laying flat.
Oh,
You're angled.
I'm so gonna go do this. I
Right?
am so gonna go do this. That is amazingly simple.
Yeah.
Because my wife has been complaining about how she's been sleeping, and she came downstairs and slept. And what's interesting is the downstairs couch where she was sleeping has more pillows on it, so she was actually not
Oh,
flat.
right. Yep.
I am
By the
so
way,
gonna do this with my bed.
and you maybe a
Look
little
into this.
TMI here, but I'll tell you another thing that helped immediate. Like first night, I slept all through the night.
Yeah,
I'm a tosser and turner. Like I struggle sleeping. Um, I'm not one of those that has to get up 4 times to go to the bathroom, but maybe once or twice I got to get up to go to the bathroom.
yeah.
Not once. Not once. Because
Uh, uh,
the circulation, I mean, that's my theory, that's what he says, and I tend to believe it. The circulation is working. I don't have to go to the bathroom. It's just, so yeah, total recommend for everybody listening.
wow. Let's see. It's not. I'm just looking that up. It's not called inverted sleeping. I'll bet it's inclined.
Incline sleeping, yeah. Incline bed. um yeah, and it's funny, like you can tell the guy is like, he's just some engineer. He's like, okay, yeah, and you can buy my, you know, some people would say, well, he's trying to sell a product. He's like, yeah, well, he created something to help your bed get inclined, but he's telling you exactly how to do it if you want to do it yourself.
Huh.
Um, and it's just, to me, it's those simple things, it's those easy things that you don't think of. They go, wow, okay. I
Right.
mean, and again, what's your uh, cost benefit analysis on that? It's pretty low.
It's
It's
pretty
like,
low. I mean, putting a
right,
couple bricks under the head of your bed, that's it.
right,
Uh, so I just looked this up just on Google. It says helps improve glymphatic drainage. I've never seen the word glymphatic before.
No.
I just learned something, so I'm going to look into this.
Right on.
Well, I'm going to look into it, and then, of course, like you said, I'm going to tinker with it. I'm actually going to try it,
Try it.
see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. The key,
What a
I'll tell you.
crazy thing if this works the way we think it does.
Well, and it's funny. It's like our body,
Yeah,
like every it goes back to what you said, like follow nature. Like we're not meant to be sitting at desks, staring at walls
right,
with you know no UV, no vitamin D, artificial lights. We're supposed to be outside, practically naked, with sunlight bearing down upon us, for a long period of time. I mean,
right.
that's how our ancestors were, and to think like, we're that much different is, again, kind of hubris, and very much like not in line with
No, it's not. Well,
science.
exactly. Well, the other thing is that speaking of what we should be like, is Clint Ober's idea of wearing plastic and rubber shoes all the time and
Hmm.
losing our connection to the earth.
Oh,
And this
yes.
is the whole concept of grounding
Yes.
and
I've
earthing.
I've heard of this. So, and I
Well,
haven't tried it. I mean, other than like to go barefoot once in a while, but like, yeah, talk about that. Like the
oh,
benefits of grounding are supposed to be pretty incredible, right?
oh, they are. This is when I heard this a couple of years ago. It just resonated. You know how when you hear things and they're right, they resonate. This
Right.
one hit hard. It is the simple idea, well, that you cannot develop inflammation when you're grounded. That's the
Okay.
bottom line. That's the punchline. Now, what you need to know is that Time Magazine did an article. In fact, this just came up on my Facebook feed from Clint Ober, that it was 20 years ago that Time Magazine had a front page story about how inflammation was basically the center of all disease.
Okay. Yeah,
And
I
we're
believe
talking,
that.
and I mean,
Yeah.
everyone knows inflammation, like if you get a bee sting, it swells up, or a mosquito bite. This is talking specifically about internal inflammation in the body, stuff that you can't see. But when it hits, it manifests as all sorts of different problems. Anything, any disease that ends in itis, like tonsillitis, is an
Right.
inflammatory disease.
Arthritis.
Arthritis, appendicitis, all of those are inflammatory diseases. And what happens is, and this is just, again, it's an amazingly simple thing. Your immune system goes out and does its job, but the way that it does it is it sends out the killer T cells. But on the molecular level, what they do is they steal electrons from the invaders, from the enemy. Okay. And by stealing
Okay.
electrons, it disrupts the cellular membrane, and the cells just dissolve. And so your problem is taken care of. But here's the thing, is if there's more, how can I say this? It's not, if there's more soldiers than enemies, the soldiers will start stealing electrons from yourself, from your own body, from your body cells. And this causes cascading inflammation. It'll start off the
Wow.
inflammatory response again. And the only way that
Wow.
stops is if your
You
body
know
has,
what's again, everything's connected, right?
right.
So what I love about that is that just deeply connects to, our ideas about the electric universe,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Absolutely. So anything that ends in itis is an inflammatory disease. The way it works is that your body's immune system sends out soldiers to attack invaders. That's the story. And the way they do that is they steal electrons from the invaders, which means that that cell of the invaders just falls apart because the electrons are part of what makes it. The problem is if there's more soldiers than invaders, the soldiers start stealing electrons from your own body,
Huh.
which causes cascading reoccurring chronic problems of inflammatory disease. The only way that process stops is if you have an excess of electrons in your body. And of course, you get that from the foods you eat, right? And from being outside and absorbing sunlight. But it
Right.
also happens when you're in touch with the earth, because the earth is negatively charged. It's a reservoir of electrons. So if you're barefoot outside and not walking on asphalt, but in touch with the earth, the ground, sand, water, dirt, you're absorbing the amount of electrons that you need to stop the inflammation process, to stop your body's immune system from overexerting itself. And
Wow.
I came to this knowledge again just by tinkering. I noticed that when I would plant in my garden, when I'd get down on my hands and knees and till the soil with my hands, planting flowers and vegetables and whatnot, I was working outside. And usually when you work outside, you get tired and you get sunbaked. But I would get invigorated. I'm
Huh.
like, wait a minute, I've been out here for like 2 hours and I'm invigorated? How is that possible? And I just chalked it up as nothing and I let it go. And years later, I did it again and the same thing happened. And then I found Clint Ober's work where he talks about grounding, how he says that we're constantly separated from the earth with these rubber shoes that we wear. And he says, just take your shoes off, watch what happens. And as soon as
Wow.
he said that, I'm like, boom, that clicked and it worked. And I'm like, okay, I'm going barefoot now. And a lot of people don't like going barefoot. I don't actually like going barefoot. So he created these flip flops that are actually conductive, and you can wear those if you don't like going barefoot.
That's
He also,
insane. That's
he also created bed sheets. Bed sheets you plug into the wall. They don't connect to the power, they connect to the ground outlet of your wall. So you can
okay.
literally sleep grounded, which
Okay.
is
This
what
is
I've done for like a year.
oh my gosh. And you've felt a big difference from
Oh
doing
my
that.
gosh, yes.
Okay. I'm totally doing this. So here's and again, this because another little again, these are like again, cost benefit analysis. There's nothing to lose by trying this stuff.
Walking
It's
barefoot doesn't cost anything.
right.
It
It's
costs nothing.
literally, it goes back to the Old Testament, looking at the snake and being healed. Like it's these simple
Right.
little things. Another thing that I that I've heard is just staring at the sun, being outside staring. Because again, this is, I mean, it makes sense.
I can tell you why that works.
Tell me.
So, my brother has done this. So, sun staring is done at a very specific time of day. It's done when the sun is low on the horizon, not straight up. Now, maybe other people
Right.
do it up, but when he did this practice, he followed people. You stare at it so you don't, burn your eyes, because you can literally do that.
Right.
But what goes on, well, part of what goes on, there's probably more to it, is that the sun puts out all sorts of infrared, ultraviolet, and visible light spectrum. What's interesting is that the infrared, when it hits us, it creates what's called easy water. It is a fourth phase of water, and this has been studied. Gerald Pollack can give you all the information you need on this. Easy water is it's kind of like egg yolk in its consistency,
Okay.
but it is charged. Now, that may not be interesting to anybody, except if you study water, you know that water doesn't carry a net negative or net charge. It's
Right.
neutral.
It's neutral. Right.
Easy water is charged. It has a net negative potential. And
Wow.
what's interesting is if you back up in the cellular process, everyone studies the Krebs cycle and about how there's exchanges of ions and it creates ATP, and ATP is the energy of the body. No, easy water is the energy of the body. That's where ATP gets its energy from. And you get easy water by standing in the sun.
That's
The
so,
sunlight creates the easy water inside of our cells through which the Krebs cycle is able to create ATP and we live. It's easy water. And the thing of it is, you don't have to stand in the sun. It's just infrared light. Infrared light is all around us all of the time. That's why people can still live in caves and still survive. And they did. Our ancestors did this when they were, surviving the catastrophic
Right.
catastrophes, about 12,000 years ago.
Right.
Infrared light's everywhere, and it creates easy water inside our cells, and thus we live.
So
It's another one of these amazingly simple things that
I,
that people know about. I mean, that scientists know about, but it doesn't gain any traction for
well,
some reason.
here's the problem, because it's, and this is again goes back to like our pride, because it's so simple. It's like
We're
it
just like,
can't
nah, it can't be.
it can't be, like, that's too good to be true,
Right,
because we all have that mini shaft syndrome of being burned by something that's too good to be true.
right.
But man, sometimes we just have to like just let go of that and just try these, like, again, do a cost benefit analysis, and like, what's the cost?
Right. So,
It's not
Mike,
very high.
so here it is. So, with easy water and with grounding, here's what my life looks like. Easy water is created on hydrophilic substances, so glass, metal, and of course your cells. So, upstairs, I've got a glass carafe that we use. It's clear. That is sitting on our countertop. That's the water that all of us drink.
Okay.
My wife has had us off tap water for years, and it doesn't matter. But we have distilled water in a glass carafe. It's absorbing infrared light. We sleep on a grounded sheet every single night.
Wow.
Just simple little
So,
things.
so
We don't even think about it. It's not like we have to oh, it's time to take my vitamins. Oh, it's time to take my supplements. It's simple water that is in a glass container sitting on the countertop. That's it. That's all
and
it takes to create easy water.
because my mind is pretty simple. I mean, or maybe it's because I'm a musician, so I think of like
Let's go
stuff
with
like
that.
this.
That.
We'll go with that. But like, and I'm sure you thought the same thing. Like, what's the common denominator in all of this stuff that we're
Absolutely.
talking about?
Yep.
It's electricity.
It
It's
is.
that we are electrical beings. The
Yep.
sun is electrical. The earth is electrical. And when we, again, you look at nature and use nature as it's meant to be, it's way easier. We
Right.
make it so hard on ourselves.
We do. We absolutely overcomplexify everything. The
It
answers are simple. Again, it goes back to that statement I said before. Does nature do anything the hard way? No. It almost can't do things the hard way.
Right.
We do it the hard way. And yes, we are a part of nature, so I guess nature can do things the hard way, but not
But it's
directly.
our it's that great blessing of free will that gets in the way.
Yeah, exactly. It's a double-edged sword to be sure.
Right. Yeah. Because we're allowed to choose. Like that's the difference, is the animals and the plants. Like, it's not like they're choosing, oh, today am I gonna look at the sun, where we have to like actually make that choice.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, and there's so much. uh, I mean, we could go on for days about this stuff, because there is. I mean, everything is electric. Everything is about magnetic currents, electrical currents, plasma. Like that is, like, if you want to get down to the bottom line, I'm just convinced that that's the bottom line.
I
That's
am too.
the atom, as the Greeks would call it, the thing that can't be divisible.
Right.
It's this idea that you know electricity is somehow involved in every aspect. And man, it's such a blind spot in so many scientists on so many levels.
It is. Let me do one thing. This is kind of me being really nitpicky here, but I want to kind of avoid some of the hubris that I know some critics are going to voice. They're going to say it's not electricity. Electricity has very specific functions, so everything can't be electricity. When you and I say electricity, what we actually mean is charge.
Right.
Charge. When you say what's the fundamental, for ease, you and I will say electricity. We know what we mean. But when we say what we actually mean is charge, because you're right, electricity doesn't always flow the way we think it does, but charge always exists. Charge
Hmm.
is in plasma. Charge is what creates electricity. So, just to be clear, if anyone's going to get cranky and say electricity is not the basis of everything, they're right. But what we mean is charge.
And I appreciate that clarification, because you are right. That's exactly right. It's yeah,
I
absolutely.
say electricity. I don't say charge. I'm not trying to correct the
No,
world, but
no,
I
no.
just,
That's a great clarification, because charge, it is important to distinguish those things. I think definitions are important. So um,
I'm going to keep saying electricity because it just sounds cool and I like it.
it is cool.
I'm just
Well,
going to go with that.
I mean, and yeah, and again, it goes back to like what we were talking about at the very beginning, like these incredible, um, what am I going to say? Um, the stuff that's available to us, the resources, let me say it that way, the resources that are just right in front of our eyes, that we just need to learn how to tap into, on is just right there. And I do think, like, this is my like white pill when it comes to science, is I think there are scientists that they might not look at it the same way we do, but they're coming to some of the same conclusions, that like
Right.
this may not be as difficult as we're making it.
Exactly. Well, I think one of the scientists, I'm going to call him an up and coming, but I only mean that in terms of coming to the same point of view that the universe is electric, is Michael Levin, the work of Michael Levin.
Okay, yeah.
His is just astounding. He's a biologist, and you want to have your head blown. Wow, look at the work that he has done.
I will. Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
just his so amazing. He just has figured out that it is electric fields, that you can take electric fields in a germinating organism and change their morphology, change what it looks like by manipulating the electric fields around it, which completely opens up or blows up the previous idea that it was genes and gene coding that created what we look like and what things look like. It's like,
Right.
wow, it's electric fields that do it? Yeah, it is. There it is.
Man, I'll definitely look that up. That's incredible. Got to I'll have to check that out. That's
Oh, and if
beautiful,
there's
man.
any way you can get him on your podcast, you need to get that guy on your podcast. He does
Oh,
podcasts.
I I
Michael
will. If he does
Michael
podcasts,
Levin.
I'll
Yeah.
okay, we'll do that. That'll be great. Well, Ben, our time is running short. I love this conversation, because we kind of delved into a bunch of different stuff. These are the kind of conversations I enjoy, because it's just, it's all connected, but it's got a little improv in there.
Right.
We
Which
hit
is
the
always
flow
where the
state a
magic.
few
Hit the
times.
flow state. Got it. Let me leave you with one more thing. This is kind of a teaser. Go to ecatTheNewFire.com. The
Okay.
letter E, cat, like meow, 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 ecatTheNewFire.com. This kind of goes back to what you said you wanted to talk about. I mean, we've gone all over the board today,
Oh
but
yeah.
this is, you'll see a video on there of a
Okay. Yeah.
light sitting next to a clock. This
Yep. I see
light
it.
is being powered by cold fusion. It has
Oh,
been
that's
burning
awesome.
continuously. Let's see, what is it? It should be up to about 120 days straight now. Cold fusion was never discounted except in the media. It was never scientifically disproven. But the media ran with it. They ran with the idea that it was BS. It was never discounted. It has now been relabeled as LENR, low energy nuclear reaction.
That's incredible. That's
And
so
it has
cool.
been put out there. It's built, it's being sold, and here it is. ECAT.
Oh
Watch this
man.
video. Watch this
Okay.
guy.
And I
Andrea
will definitely
Rossi.
put this in
He's
the show notes as well.
absolutely do it. It's
All
awesome.
right. Cool, man. Well, Ben, thank you. I love having you on. Your unique take on science and all things human is wonderful.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, let's do it again, man, for sure.
Anytime.
All
Have a good
right.
day.
You are listening to And If Love Remains.
First of 23 installments requested by Dr. Levitt. Trying to be in compliance here because we're taking him and that whole organization down.